If you've ever wanted to try something that's a little bit more lurky, a little less clean and polished, then possibly a black water tank would be for you. So, this is my neon tank right now. As you can see, I have a sand base. There is some active substrate mixed in there, purely because it was in the tank beforehand. There's lots of bits of wood, there's lots of twigs, and you can see them floating, and on the base there is quite a few leaves. So if you want a quick list of leaves that you could walk out your house now in the UK and go and collect from a safe area, the list I've got is English oak, sweet chestnut, common beech, alder, apple, hazel, silver birch, hawthorn, Norway maple. There's probably more, and if you want a bit of honesty, I wrote that list down in a notebook years ago and have no idea where I got it from. But I have checked all those, they are relatively safe. Couple of things to make sure they're safe. Make sure they're not green. Make sure there's no greenery on them. You need them to be brown, you need them to be crispy. You need to make sure that they've not picked up any pollutants. So if the council's been spraying for weed killers in the locally around there, and then the weeds have been there, they might have things like that on them. So make sure they're collected away from that. Ideally, probably not somewhere where dogs have been peeing on them either. That's also another great advantage. I tend to try and collect away from main roads, as because even with the improvements, cars still do cause pollutants, and the trees do take a lot of that up. The ones I'm saying with the improvements is you don't have to worry about lead as much anymore, but there's still some in there. So I collect away from roads. I'm very lucky that I live just outside the boundaries of Sherwood Forest. Plenty of trees around here. What's the advantage of doing these tannins? So when we talk about black water, we're talking about normally. Okay, I'm going to just go for the norm. We're talking about very soft water. In this case, I'm using straight RO. If you don't want to go down that route, and straight RO has its problems, my pHs are sitting very, very low. Aim for something like pH 6.2. That is still incredibly soft, but you should be able to have a functioning filter cycle at that. And then add your botanicals. You can just buy black water extract. I prefer to add, in this case, leaves, alder cones, and twigs. That's my personal choice. As well as being very soft water, it's full of these humic and tannic acids. And what they do is they basically provide a different ecosystem than you would see for clear water. The tannins will promote a lot of healing. Tannins aren't that healthy. We tend to have this thing in fish keeping that tannins are great and all species can love them. Hard water species don't have the enzymes required to split the tannic acids away from the protein, so they can actually get a lot of problems with not getting enough protein in their diet in the presence of tannins. But it is my belief that things like neon tetra disease and a lot of the illnesses that we see for things like betas, I believe it's because they've evolved in this sort of water. Black, murky, not particularly pretty, shall we say. Although, I must admit, I love black water setups. So yeah, if you're trying it as the first time, aim for the low sixes in terms of pH. Try and keep your KH about 2 or 3 at the lowest. But then add your tannins, so add your leaves if you're confident with them. Add alder cones. You can buy Indian almond leaves online. I used to sell them. And then I started to find that my supplier was shipping me more and more fresh leaves. It looked like they'd been picked and then left to artificially dry. And this was a concern for me because we know that there's different types of tannins. And as the tree goes closer to shedding its leaves, it reduces the more harmful type of tannin and increases the more useful type of tannin, the more positive type of tannin. So yes, if you interrupt that process and dry it out, it will still go brown and crunchy. But my concern is it's being picked at the wrong point in the cycle. So I would rather get leaves that I know have fallen from the trees and therefore should have got rid of the more harmful, I'm using that word very cautiously, type of tannin. Pretty sure I've got an article about this on the website. If not, there will be one soon. So when you're looking at this, I go out, I collect these. I also collect alder cones at the end of the season as well. Again, purely because it's a control thing for me. So alder cones, leaves. If you can get some relatively fresh bogwood, that can also help a lot. A lot of the time, bogwood has been in a literal peat bog, so it's absorbed those humic and tannic acids from around it. Tannins, in my opinion, break down faster than humics, so you may be getting that brown out of there, but it may be more humic acids than tannic acids. I've got no proof of that, by the way, guys. That is just a personal opinion, and I'll always say when it is on that sort of thing. Now, I'm running this at much lower than 6 pHs. This is sitting at about 5.2 right now. I will have no functioning cycle. So how do I keep on top of that? The ammonia is locked up as safer ammonium. Treat that as like nitrates. Because there's no functioning cycle, the ammonia is not becoming nitrite, so I'm not getting any problems with nitrite, and it also doesn't go through for nitrates. If you look in the back, though, you can actually see that despite it being incredibly low pH, some of the duckweed is still surviving. It's not growing as fast as it would in a more normal pH range, but it is definitely still growing, so that will be helping, and also regular water changes. So for me, I use straight RO with a lot of humic and tannic acids in it, and I just purely do that by, I've got a water bus outside and I mix the two. If you've seen an earlier video I did, you saw it was a time lapse where I dropped, it was about an hour, time lapse of about an hour, where I dropped some alder cones into water, and you can see how fast the alder cones were leaching the tannins. So it was absolutely brilliant. Anyway, yeah, you can also sort of see the neons floating around in there. That whole tank, not including the fish, the tank was secondhand, so about 20 quid. The light I had already, but it was a very cheap light off Amazon, so have a look for whatever's the cheapest light you can see, because it was probably about that price. Obviously the leaves and twigs were free. There's a tiny bit of bogwood in there that I got from another tank, but again, it was probably 3 or 4 quid's worth of bogwood in there. The substrate, pick your substrate. Again, that was in the tank. I'd had another setup before this, so I put some sand in, so I couldn't tell you how much the sand cost. It is running an APS filter, because I do actually quite like the one where you can add bits to it and take it away. That's what's in there. There is a heater, relatively new, and that is running off, it's not an Inkbird, it's another brand, but that's running off a thermostat because I tend to do that. So it was a relatively inexpensive tank to set up, and then I went and added some neons because I like them. I know there's a lot of neon hate, but I quite like them. But yeah, that's that tank. There will be more things being added to it in due course, but not just yet. I'm still enjoying just watching the neons take over and explore everything, and yeah, those leaves will eventually stop floating, but not today.